As someone who makes anime videos on YouTube, it is inevitable that I will have to talk about Neon Genesis Evangelion someday. No, I'm not being held hostage by the anime elites who say that Neon Genesis is the greatest show of all time, nor am I on the other side of the argument that claims that it has no real value as a series. Eva is certainly one of the most interesting and unique series that has risen to the top of any medium, and today I want to discuss my thoughts on the show and try to at least make some sense of it. I'm guessing that anyone who has followed my channel at all over the years could guess that I really enjoy Eva. A quirky series that attempts to explore some deep ideas is basically everything I look for when I sit down to watch a show. And I'm actually surprised at the following of people on my Twitter timeline that stood by the idea that Eva is not philosophically deep. That is something that I very much disagree with, as the entire appeal of Eva is that it explores rich ideas about loneliness and what it means to be human. The main way it achieves this is through the experimental nature of its direction. To be honest, I think Eva represents experimental art done well. When watching Eva, the often odd directional style and use of wild imagery reflects the characters in ways that pushes forward the medium of anime. It walks a fine line between a typical dark action series and an off-the-wall mirage of the human psyche, and it achieves this through its many experimental tendencies. And let's be honest for a second, experimental films and art forms are often boring and lame. I have had the pleasure of sitting through many hours of experimental films back when I studied film in school, and let me tell you that the vast majority of them failed to achieve anything notable. In theory, experimental art forms are fantastic, a true show for the thematic achievements of an art form. But far too often they get too obsessed with the uncanny and lose their audience along the way. But for Eva, that is never the case. This is experimental with a purpose, to help us connect with the mindset of the characters and help the audience engage with many of its ambitious ideas. Loneliness is at the core of Eva, and is what so many of the characters struggle with. The idea that everyone in the world is alone. How do we cope with being alone? For some, it is pleasing your parents. For others, it's achieving career advancements. Much of the direction in Eva helps explore this innate feeling of being alone through much of its experimental ideas, as well as through the limitations of its production. I don't really care what kind of production it had, but I actually really enjoy its use of, let's call it, the long pause. Anno uses these long pauses throughout the series to ensure that the episode meets its required TV length, but these pauses often punctuate the isolation of the characters. There is nothing more awkward and disconnecting with another person than having a long pause where you feel you should speak, but you just can't. Whether you are facing the fact that your life is going to be lived for someone else, that you are slipping further beneath the people around you, or you are going to have to kill a person you love. These more exotic aspects of the production cultivate a feeling of sadness that fits in beautifully with the score and overall imagery of the series. There are many images in Eva that are engraved into my brain, not only for just how beautiful they are, but how they make you feel in the context of the series. One of these moments being arguably one of the series' most controversial, when Shinji is holding Kaworu and choosing whether or not he should kill him. Yes, we hold here for an exceptionally long time, with nothing happening. But at the same time, the image provides an art gallery-like reaction out of the viewer, or at least it did for me. The Eva has humanity in the palm of its hand. It has a grip on the emotions of its characters. We are left sitting here with a beautiful image, contemplating if Shinji should follow through or not. Even if it gets a little tedious while watching, it certainly meets its effect, since that image is one I return to again and again when I think about Eva. There is an incredible amount of isolation felt in this one moment, in one image being indicative of what Shinji goes throughout the entirety of the series. And no doubt Eva would not reach the heights it has without our favorite little fuck-up, Shinji. I am particularly fond of Shinji as a main character for how different he feels from most of the main characters in literally every other art form. I understand that many people might not sympathize with him because every hour is sad boy hours when it comes to Shinji, but he fits so perfectly with the tone and setting of the series. I personally found it very easy to sympathize with his difficulty to connect with the people around him. Sometimes even just moving forward in life can be one of the hardest things we can do. And it is exactly that in which Shinji struggles with throughout much of the series. And now we have to bring up Eva's obsession with psychoanalysis and Freudian ideology. The Oedipus complex is all over Neon Genesis Evangelion. Characters are obsessed with their parents, and little do they know that the Evas they have been piloting the entire time are created with the soul of their mothers. Basically, the Eva pilots in the series are fighting from the womb of their mothers, and the adults in the series are trying to get back to that same state. While I disagree with many of the conclusions that Freud comes to in just about all of his arguments, there is no denying that a longing for a time where we were safe and had no issues in the world is a noble one. For many of us, that comes back to our adolescence, looking at our youth as an escape from the reality of the world. I think Eva makes a pretty compelling argument about how nice it would be and how we all have a collective longing for a simple time where we have an ability to understand one another. There is an optimism lying at the bottom of Eva, that if we are able to understand one another, then maybe we will be able to fight the loneliness we feel. To get to the truth, we need to find that understanding first. Now, I don't think this should come in the form of living in a world where we don't really know what reality is, but the goal should be to achieve this type of understanding after we learn to think for ourselves. This leads us to our own identity, something that no character can fully come to terms with in either ending of the series. In the original ending, it is argued that our identity takes on many forms, not only in our mind, but in the mind of others. How are we perceived in the minds of other people? And that surely creates what our identity should be. But we can't control this, and we know that we can't control it. And yet we still try. Each character in Eva tries to find their own authentic self, the one who surely must be them, but in truth, that self does not exist. Humans are pieced together by our environment, mixing with some of our innate tendencies. Maybe there is no true us, and maybe that is okay. That is the realization from the original Eva ending. As the years move forward, our identities have become less and less stable. The anxiety of not choosing what you are meant to do looms large over every single person born in today's climate. This growing anxiety to find your true self is at the core of Eva. For Asuka, it seems as if she was born to be an Eva pilot. She takes pride in her natural talent for this cause. But we see that she is susceptible to failing when it comes to piloting an Eva, which destroys her identity when the only thing she associates herself with is being the best pilot. Many of the ideas in Eva stem from becoming an adult and trying to understand the world around you. But to only look at the story through that lens would be to miss many of the ideas inherent to the entirety of the show. The adult characters are some of the most fascinating in the series. Shinji's father gets very little exploration throughout much of the series. It seems as if he resents Shinji for being the reason that his wife is not here. He is obsessed with his wife to the point where he creates a clone of her within Rei. In the end of Evangelion, we get one line where he talks about how he didn't want to hurt Shinji, but in reality, that is all he ever did. Even the figurehead of the entire operation, the representation of pure masculinity in Eva, is still a child underneath. The other adults in the series still struggle with their own identity, to find purpose in a world that doesn't tell you what you should be. To pilot the Eva is always a choice for Shinji, and every time he decides to turn back and get in that monstrosity again. Even when Shinji is tasked with saving humanity, the anxiety of knowing what to do with your life cripples him. Eva cries out to modern society about how anxiety and depression form around thoughts about who we are and why we are here. Answering those questions is something that takes a lifetime to grasp, but it is through pieces of art like Eva that can help us understand them a little bit better. I know for myself, at least, the struggle to understand who I am looms large, but it is reassuring that I am not the only one who is going through it. There are so many other lenses to read Neon Genesis Evangelion, a sexual and religious reading being two that I might make videos about in the future. But there is one thing for certain. Out of all the odd directional choices and big ideas explored, Eva has certainly done something right to become one of the icons of anime. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and have seen any of my other videos and enjoy my work, go to the link down below and subscribe to my Patreon account. Anything there helps me out a lot, and of course you'll get access to all of the awesome benefits there. Follow me on Twitter at AnieEssays if you want to keep up with just some of my general thoughts on anime. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and I hope to see you in the next video.